Oh, 1 second. Hello there, my name is Quentin Russell. I am the engagement specialist here at Doc365, and today, as part of the next part of our SharePoint Basics series, we're going to be talking about record management. Now, normally with our SharePoint Basics series, this is a bit of a disclaimer. We do go in and show you how to do the specific things that we're going to talk about today. Unfortunately, records management is kind of a massive undertaking. So while I can't show you the actual specifics of how to enable some things, I can definitely provide you tips for how to use SharePoint as a basic records management tool. So as part of that, we'll basically show you things that you can do inside of SharePoint Online using the SharePoint team site to build that out. But we'll get to that when we get to that. That said, let's go over what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, we're going to talk about who we are. So who Doc365 is, what we do, establish a little credibility on our part. After that, we'll talk about records management in general. So going over what it is, the stages of it, things to keep in mind, so that we all have the same kind of operational definition going into this webinar and as we talk about things later on. After that, we'll go into why you should be using record management, specifically why it's important, how it can help your organization, and why you should prioritize either building a records management process and plan for yourself, or basically going to another company and getting help with that. And then finally, how to set up a record management plan. We'll go over that, and how to use SharePoint Online to build out a space for you to keep your records and keep everything safe. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to type them out into the chat. The way we'll handle that is at the end of the webinar, I will do a question and answer session going off of the questions from the chat. I'll just go through those in order. If there's anything I cannot answer today, I will make sure to do the research, find that answer for you, and send it to you later as part of the webinar recording that we send out at the end of every webinar. With that said, let's go jump into the webinar. Who are we? Well, we're Doc365. We're a company located in Jacksonville, Florida. We are a Microsoft Gold certified partner. We have over 18 years of experience working with SharePoint to deliver exceptional productivity solutions. So we've worked with a wide range of companies in a variety of industries to implement a diverse array of SharePoint productivity tools. These include intranet portals, contract management systems, CRM solutions, and more. If you have any questions about those, feel free to check them out on our website, mydoc365.com. / well, any product you want really. But if you take a look at those and think there's anything that you would be interested in using with your company, we'd love to schedule a free 30 to 45-minute demo with you. That way we can explore your needs and see if any of our products would be a good fit for your company. Odds are they will be, but sometimes they aren't, and that's okay if it's not. All you've lost is about 30 to 45 minutes of your day. No obligation. We won't hound you for payments or anything. So with that said, let's jump into the webinar. So first of all, what is records management? Well, basically the best way to put that is that records management is the process of storing and maintaining important documents and files. Pretty simple. This generally includes the general happenings of your business, different transactions that you do, things like your tax records, important things like that. Essentially, a big part of records management is being able to pull and produce policies and procedures as evidence in cases of potential non-compliance. Say something goes wrong, you're facing a lawsuit, facing a potential regulatory fine or fee, that sort of thing. Records management can essentially help you exonerate yourself if you've done nothing wrong, or at least mitigate the damage if there was any potential wrongdoing on your part. So the records management process can be broken down into about 5 different steps. So first of all, there's the actual document creation. So that's anything from the your tax documents, like I was saying, any important policies and procedures that you've created just for your organization in general. Like it's the actual generation of the initial document, and then it's its use. So essentially, is it in active circulation? Is it being distributed? Is it being actively worked on? Once a document has been created and once it's kind of gone through its life cycle where people have used it, and after a certain period of time, maybe 1 to 2 years, the document becomes inactive. That's when we get to the classification state. So this is declaring a document inactive, storing it where it needs to be stored once it's been declared inactive. So does it need to be moved somewhere? Does it need to be put into like an archive folder? Does it need to be placed somewhere else? Really, that's how that gets broken down. Once a document has sort of been classified, then it goes into storage. So that's actually taking the inactive file, storing it away, and storing it in a manner that allows people to both access it for later and then also perform any general upkeep that needs to happen. So basically going through, auditing things, cross-referencing documents, which takes us on to the next stage, which is maintenance. Maintenance involves basically tracking where the inactive records are stored and ensuring that they can be retrieved pretty easily. That's pretty self-explanatory. So that's a situation where you're going through, checking to see if everything is stored properly, if not, rectifying that issue. So say a document from 2020 is stored in a folder that is clearly marked for 2019, moving that out of there, setting that into 2020, and making sure that it's in its proper place so that if it does need to be accessed at a later date, you can do so without having to dig through everything. Because if there's one thing that can be a major issue for a lot of companies, it's taking a look at their records, taking a look at everything, and finding that they're just an incomprehensible mess. After that, once you've moved through all those stages and you've come to the end of a document's lifecycle and even a record's lifespan, it comes to actually disposing of it. So how do you safely get rid of it? If it's a physical document, do you shred it? Do you, throw it away? Do you send it off somewhere else? If it's a digital document, do you delete it? Do you offload it onto a hard drive? Do you do really anything that gets it off of your main file serving server's main file sharing system and onto somewhere else? Or do you just get rid of the document entirely? In terms of what types of records that people keep, this is, again, pretty self-explanatory. You've got stuff like purchases. So basically, whether that's going through like a vendor for raw materials, or if you're going to someone for just like office chairs, pens, various office supplies like that, keeping a record of that for financial uses, specifically for accounting. Sales. So essentially keeping a track of what sales you've made, how you made them, when they were made, the terms of those contracts and everything. Then you also have like stuff like yearly revenue. So where are all your income sources coming from? Are you keeping track of that information? How is all of that stored? Then you've got like tax documents. So basically, whether that's your company's overall tax documents, relevant tax documents for employees, benefits. So basically like our employees taking deductions off on their paycheck and everything. And then you also have like contracts. So not necessarily like sales contracts, but like, what NDAs do you have? What master service agreements are you part of? What services are you obligated to offer to someone? What are the terms of your partnership? What do you have to do to stop someone from suing you? All of these are fairly important documents that you should definitely be keeping track of. And these are just kind of a small sampling, but just so that we all kind of have the same understanding. But in terms of records and everything, one thing that you should also keep in mind is different levels of compliance. So depending on your industry, your company is going to have differing levels of compliance that it has to adhere to. So for instance, like software companies, while there is a level of compliance that they have to adhere to in terms of, the management of their clients' data and everything, making sure that no malicious third parties can get access to that, there's not as much of a compliance requirement for that, as opposed to, say, a hospital where there are rigorous compliance measures that must be upheld due to the fact that, hospitals kind of are very highly regulated by the government. And so there's a lot of stuff like HIPAA that needs to be adhered to. So not only making sure that you're storing those records, but that the right people are able to access those records, because otherwise hospitals can face major malpractice lawsuits. Well, I don't think malpractice is actually the right term for that, but it is definitely, HIPAA violations can lead to major fines and potential lawsuits. And just in general, if you're not compliant with the regulations of your industry, if you're not compliant with the terms laid down by the contracts that you are required to adhere to, then your company could end up facing major lawsuits, fines, and fees. Which I guess kind of leads us into why records management is important. There's three major things to keep in mind when it comes to considering the gravity of record management. So the first one is that it can overall just help you improve business practices. The second is that it can help you with compliance. And then the third, which is slightly related to the second, but the third is that it can definitely provide you some measure of legal protection. Like it's not going to be a bulletproof vest against any and all lawsuits, but it will definitely help in the case you do ever face a lawsuit that directly relates back to, say, your company's operations and whether or not you're acting in good faith. So moving on. Now, records management helps with business practices. Well, by putting everything in place, the policies and procedures for record management, you're essentially enforcing quality control over your documents. So if you're tracking all of the data related to them, so who's updating them, when they're updating them, what they are actually updating them with, where are they being stored, you're essentially making it so that there's a level of accountability there. So people can't just do random things with documents. They can't just make extra copies and throw them all around, store them in their email inbox, have things languish in a OneDrive, that sort of thing. Instead, you are essentially, you're making everyone adhere to a specific standard. And when everyone's adhering to that standard, then you can operate more smoothly because you have this is how you're supposed to handle this document. You cannot go outside of this. And if you do, you will be punished. So if everyone handles the document the same way, then you can take a look at any deviations in that process, any issues that come up along that line. And even if they don't directly relate to records management, you can say, well, we've actually identified this major flaw. We've identified this major issue that comes up. What can we do to resolve it? And by having all of your documented procedures in place, you can take a look at them and you can say, well, this is obviously not working. We've tried it. We've done this. We know it doesn't work. So let's alter this to better match what people want to do, how people are going to want to do it. And we will be able to do this a lot better. And so if you're just doing this all over your organization and basically getting this one piece organized, it generally tends to spread outward. Because once people recognize quality, once people recognize a certain standard for anything really, they'll want to spread it out to the rest of their work environment. So they'll spread it to their own personal files. They'll, it'll spread out to the different departments in your organization. And it essentially starts a domino effect where you can kind of get things more standardized and in line with how you want them to be, as opposed to just a loose conglomeration of SharePoint sites and documents thrown all over the place. So another thing that records management helps with is that it helps with compliance. Non-compliance is a major issue. While the level, like I said previously, the level of compliance that you need varies depending on your industry, all companies need to be compliant. And a lot of that involves records management and regular audits. It's super hard to do an audit of your organization, how your documents are stored, whether all of your records are where they need to be, if everything's a mess. Well, I mean, if everything's a mess, it's actually pretty easy to do the initial audit of everything's foobar, we need to do something better. But once you've identified that everything's screwed up, then there's the long process of getting everything put back together, set up and organized. And once you get to that point, then you have to start getting into the groove of getting everything right. And it's just a whole uphill battle that generally a lot of organizations don't tend to win unless they are, putting their nose to the grindstone and getting everyone involved and invested in this. So getting this started ahead of time, getting this built out, and having a records management plan and doing it in a way that is intuitive for people, it can help make that a lot easier. It can help your regular audits become a lot easier. And as you audit everything, you can then examine discrepancies in the organization by someone being able to jump into your records and just say, okay, well, this is screwed up, but not in the sense of the whole system is screwed up, but there is a discrepancy here. Then they can resolve that discrepancy and help your company avoid a potential lawsuit. Because instead of having to sift through 10,000 file folders, they can just go, okay, I need to go here. This is wrong. Fix it. And that basically ensures that you're avoiding massive fees from, like, say, if you're a hospital and there's a potential HIPAA violation, you can resolve that issue, get on top of it. As opposed to, there's a system where, everything's messed up. There is that HIPAA violation there, but you're not able to see it. And then finally, how record management help? Well, it provides legal protection. One of the main benefits is that if you're facing a lawsuit, if you have a records management plan in place, if you are following it and adhering to it, then you'll be able to produce documentation that says, yes, we've been operating in good faith. Yes, we have done everything right. Yes, we've done it all correct. And in that case, you're not going to have to face a protracted legal battle. Like, even if you are, so like in the case of a potential lawsuit, say you run into a situation where you've done nothing wrong. The lawsuit is just completely false, flagrant violation, yada, yada. Unfortunately, if you have everything messed up, you can't access the evidence that you need to provide that, then you're going to have to, you're going to have to spend the time to go through and sift through all of your disparate, broken record system just to find the evidence you need to exonerate yourself. And in that time, you're spending thousands of dollars on legal fees and facing a situation where it might just be more cost effective to settle. And the thing about settling in a lawsuit is that while it doesn't necessarily mean that you are in the wrong, settling in a lawsuit usually means in the court of public opinion that you actually did something wrong, and you're basically just taking the cheaper, more affordable alternative to, being found non-compliant, being found in violation of whatever the person is suing over, and then, having to give them tens of thousands to even millions of dollars, depending on the level of, issue that they have with you. So that's why record management, and even if you've done something wrong, it can help you identify and say, well, yes, we actually did do something wrong. Okay. What can we do? How can we plan? How do we avoid having to do a big legal battle? Can we see if they want to settle? Either way, it just helps you, speeds things up. And even if in the situation where you have done something wrong, you're still saving some level of money. And it can allow you to resolve that issue, see why that happened, and prevent it from ever happening again in the future. So now that we've kind of gone over that, let's go over how to set up a record management plan in SharePoint Online. So the way this is going to work is that I'm going to talk to you guys about the actual planning process itself. And then as part of that, I will go into a live SharePoint site and I'll show you guys just some basic things that you can do with a SharePoint site to make it effective for basically storing your records. So things that you can do, things that you can add. And during that, I'll also reference some other webinars that we've done. So rather than kind of going over a full how-to of because we are going to be talking, I'm going to be talking about workflows, things that you can do there, metadata, how a team site works, permissions. I'm not going to go in depth on each of those because I've done, as part of the SharePoint Basic series, we've done those in the past. So the best way to get access to those would be to just head on over to our website, mydoc365.com/webinars. If you scroll down, you're actually able to access all of those different webinars for free. So if you want to do that, we'd love to have you watch those videos, take a look at them, kind of get a more in-depth look at those, to kind of get the whole, 411 on each of the kind of things that I'm going to mention offhand. Basically, there's 5 major steps for setting up a record management plan, specifically using SharePoint Online. So first you want to set up a retention schedule. This is pretty simple. From there, you'll want to establish the policies and procedures that you're going to use in order to, maintain all of your different policies. From there, you'll want to set up how you're going to store things. Now, there are a couple ways you can store things. I'm just going to show you a real basic way in SharePoint Online, specifically using a team site. And then from there, we'll go into what you need to do after that, which is compliance auditing. So basically setting up a schedule for that, making sure that you're doing that on a regular basis. And then finally, we'll want to talk about the disposal of obsolete records, basically how to manage that and ways you can keep things from piling up and making sure that you're, getting rid of things in a compliant manner. So basically setting up a retention schedule. So the first thing you want to do is you need to determine how long a document can exist as active versus inactive. Basically, ways you want to determine this is the last time a document was used, when a document was created, when was the last time it was updated, all of that information. There are other things that you can tie into that, say maybe when a new regulatory practice comes down, new regulation hits, and you have to update said policy. Like say if you are doing like policy and procedure management, and you have to specifically keep a record of your policies. Are you keeping everything versioned within SharePoint Online using Word's versioning system, or are you maintaining different versions of a document? So like version 1, version 2, version 3, and keeping those as separate copies. What are you doing with the previous copies? How are you storing the latest version? You also want to take a look at things such as, what changes have been made. So is it a situation where, you make a document inactive when just the latest version comes out? So how often are you doing that? If so, are you going to want to use, what SharePoint tools are you going to want to use for that? Because there are a couple things. If you have a situation where you have a document that's being updated regularly and you don't want to take the time to make a copy, archive the previous copy, et cetera, then there are a couple other tools that you can use. Like for instance, with SharePoint Records Management, there's two ways you can do it. You can essentially move the document to another location, to a wholly separate document library, archive it, save it, make it so no one else has permission to access it, or you can use in-place records management. So essentially that just means it basically allows you to store active and inactive documents within the same space in a collaborative environment. So basically this allows you to have records exist and be managed across multiple sites to allow for easier record creation. You can activate this at the site collection level if you are an administrator. And one thing I will do is, so we're not going to cover that right now because that does require a higher level permissions access than I currently have in the SharePoint environment. But what I can do is I can send you guys a how-to for how to turn on in-place records, records management in SharePoint Online, and allow you to experiment with that to see if that's something that might benefit your organization. But once you've kind of set up when a document is supposed to be archived and everything, it's time to establish policies and procedures for not only just like what that looks like, but what people need to do with that. So essentially where it goes, who is allowed to access it, are changes allowed to be made to it after the fact, can copies be made, all of that information. And these should be communicated and applied universally across your organization. This level of uniformity basically helps people access important records anywhere. So if you're doing records management on a department by department basis, so basically you have like the HR records site, you have the sales records site, and you're storing that information in your organization, any SharePoint administrator, any outside person should be able to go into one site, learn how things are stored, gain access to that information, and then be able to jump over to another site and access information the same way. If not, you have a breakdown in record storage. Now, there are going to be some exceptions to that. There will be situations where you, where potentially, if it, like with HR, there are a certain level of regulations and compliance that you need to adhere to that sales doesn't necessarily have to adhere to. But in that situation, that should be communicated clearly. There should be like how-to guides for how to get access to that information. And it shouldn't be utter mess, and it shouldn't be a completely different setup. It should be something, you should be taking your universal procedure and applying it with modifications, so it's at least similar, if that makes sense. So going on to actually how to set up storage, basically once you've kind of set up your schedule, created your record policies, it's now time to actually start setting up your different records. So if you'll give me a second, we're going to go into a bog standard team site. So basically in SharePoint, so I have done a SharePoint basic series on team sites. So if you have any questions about team sites, how they work, what goes on with them, how you can use them, go make sure to check out that webinar. But actually, better idea. What I will do is, as part of the webinar recording and everything, I will send you a link to all of the, as part of the recording, I will send a link out to everyone, the different SharePoint basic series that reference these, so that you guys can gain access to that information and kind of know what I'm talking about as I go along. So let me write this down. But basically, so with a team site, the TLDR of that is that they are essentially sites that are really good for internal collaboration. They're not meant for outside consumption. So with a team site, it basically allows you to do, you know, that's the ideal site that you want to start with when it comes to record management. Now, basically what you want to do is you want to come in here and you want to go to a document library. So you either want to go to the default document library that comes with this, or if you want, you can use build a new separate document library for that. Basically, what you want to do is you want to come in here and you want to build out the different metadata columns in here to collect the information that you want to get about the different documents that you're, you know, the different records you're storing here. So in this case, we're going to want information. So basically you have the name of the document, when was the last time it was modified, and who was the last person to modify. But one thing we're going to want to come and do in here is we're going to want to come and add a date. And we're going to want to go with created. So this is essentially when the document was initially created. You don't want to have a default value for like a calculated or default value based off of when it was added in here. You want to be referencing the original document's created date, so that for accurate, basically for accurate record keeping, essentially. So you want to do that right there. Oop. Creation date. From there, you're also going to want to add something similar to like a document ID. So essentially a number that you can use to essentially say, okay, so this is, well, you don't want to actually use number for this, because generally you want to put like an identifier. So essentially if it's something like for the legal department, it's LD-01, LD-02. So actually use a single line of text and essentially do, so like LD-01, well, actually that's default value. Do not enter a default value, but essentially the document ID, save that. Then what you'll also want to do is you'll probably want to add something like with multiple, so we'll go with department. And then once you've done that, you can start uploading documents within here, basically using that basic record keeping system so that people can come in and access that. So these columns right here in a document library are called metadata. We did our last SharePoint basic series on that, but essentially metadata is a tag that you can apply to a file that makes it more easy to search. So if I were to come up in here and I were to search by, say, department. So I come to the site and I want to find all of the records associated with like the legal department or the marketing department. I can just come through and search legal/marketing, and it'll actually show up in the search because that is a metadata tag that's attached to that. You want to configure the different metadata for your records, not only so that it's indexed properly within SharePoint, but just so that you can search through it using that. So when the time comes for you to audit your different documents, when it comes time to reference these at a later date, you can come in and just find that information. That's kind of a basic structure that you can do to storing those. You can also do different folders and everything. So if you want to store that information on a folder by folder basis, so by going like 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, storing based off of that, storing based off of department, you can do a whole folder subfolder structure to really do that. One thing that you can also do is you can come in here and you can turn on, let me click on the right thing. You can set up different alerts in the system. So essentially you can set it up so that anytime someone adds something in here, makes a change, modifies anything, deletes something, you can configure different alerts in here to come to your email to say, hey, someone did this, someone did that, and it'll show you who the user was, when they did it. So you can configure these alerts. You can also set up a daily summary to come to you. So for instance, if you want to have a daily summary of any changes that have been made in here, if records are being updated that frequently, or you can have it be a weekly summary. So whenever at the end of the week, you get a summation that says, hey, these changes were made, these documents were added in here. So then you can come back in here and reference these, take a look at those changes, make sure they were all done properly, just to make sure that all of your records are being stored in the best way possible. Another thing that you can do is you can set up some automation. So you can potentially set up a reminder. So basically you want to, let's just go to Power Automate. So creating a flow. So basically you can send a customized email when a new file is added. So what Power Automate is it allows you to build different automated workflows in SharePoint Online. And we've done another one on those, so I'll send you the link for that as well. But you can make it so that you can, so if someone does want to add a record to the system, you can make it so that it requires manager approval. So you can select from these pre-built templates to do so. So for instance, say someone wants to archive a document, they would have to get permission to do so. You can also set it up so that it gets a notification for everyone. So everyone knows when a document is archived, or potentially it needs to get, it needs an approval to go through. You can also build a custom flow. So we'll go to see your flows. So let's jump into Power Automate and kind of show off how that works. So say you wanted to create a flow potentially for the rest of your, say for instance, you don't want to manually pull things through. So let me get into the actual flow creation screen. So in this case, we'll go with a automated cloud flow. So say we want to set up a situation when date hit so we'll skip that for right now. But basically you want to do it say there's a situation you want to do where, so this is, well, first of all, this is what the actual flow creation looks like. But say for instance, in SharePoint, you want to set it up so that when, there's tons of these, but say for the trigger, a document is X number of years old or X number of months old, or when a document reaches a certain point or is modified or deleted, you can set it up so that that a flow gets set up to automatically copy that document and archive it into, say, the record center right here. That would allow you to, instead of having to manually download, then upload the document or copy it over, you can instead make it so that it just gets copied into here, into the right folder, depending on the different document IDs right here. So maybe based off of department, creation date, modified, when it was, what year it was, anything like that. And that can definitely help speed things up and kind of get rid of a lot of the human error. Now, I'm not going to go into the actual workflow creation process. That is just something that you would be able to do. I can send you a video on how to build workflows and how to configure those in your SharePoint environment similar to this. But yeah, so that's just some of the ways that you can kind of get a record storage set up. And then from there, you can just manage permissions. So you can determine who is allowed to access it, what permissions they have in here. So if we'll just go to real quick, library settings. Oop, nope, that would probably be more site permissions. But if we'll get to this and everything, yeah, permissions management. So basically permissions for this document library, setting up who has access to it, who can make changes. You know, do they inherit permissions from the rest of the site? Do they inherit permission, like who has the ability to do what? So for instance, like members have the ability to edit, owners have full control, and visitors are only allowed to read, but then you can just click right here to essentially make any edits or changes. So you can essentially say that they can do more than just view it. They can actually suggest changes to something, but those would require the permission of someone else within the organization, someone's approval. So that's basically, you want to kind of configure that to, so only certain people have access to the records, only certain people can upload records, and only certain people can make changes to them. And that's how you want to configure that. We do also have a webinar on user and group management that I will send you guys as part of the recording. But basically, by combining all of that together, you can set up a semi-automated record management system that allows you to keep track of everything without having to spend too much time manually porting over files. So let's jump back into here real quick. Once you've kind of got that storage system set up, it's time to actually start auditing everything. So basically, you should be conducting a regular audit of your company's records. So this can help you see if everyone's following the plan. So you can check out, you can set up a regular plan, or by setting up an alert within the actual library that you're using to store your records. So basically doing the daily summary of everything of all the changes that have been made, the weekly summary, or getting notified every time someone makes a change there. That way you can go in, check to make sure everything's accurate, and you can kind of have more peace of mind. So instead of doing everything at once, you're doing just a tiny bit every day. So you're still spending, well, I mean, realistically, you are still spending a similar amount of time. It's just spread out over the course of the year, as opposed to a 3-month block where you're just spending the whole time doing it. Now, will it actually take 3 months? Probably not. It depends on the size of your organization. But once you've kind of got your auditing process filled out, it's time to determine how you're going to dispose of documents. So once everything's set up, once everything's in motion, it's time to figure out how to dispose of unneeded documents. So basically, first you want to check if there's any regulation for document disposal. So do you need, like, do you have, like, if you have physical copies, do you need to shred them? Is there any process you have to go through for deleting documents, like an approval process or whatever? But once you've kind of set that up, it's time to figure out the best way to get rid of them that doesn't compromise your company. Again, there are some workflows that you can set up so that once a archived document gets old enough or reaches a certain point, it will the workflow will start the process of deleting the document. So it'll like send a approval workflow to someone to say, hey, this is trying to delete the document. Is this fine? Whoever's responsible for that can then check that document, approve the deletion, and it's good to go. So yeah, that's basically how to set up some basic record management in SharePoint Online. Not as in-depth as I would have liked it to be, but siesta la vie. So does anyone have any questions before we finish for the day? While you guys kind of think of that, I do want to talk about some of our upcoming webinars. So next week on May 18th, we'll be talking about how to manage external sharing in SharePoint Online, so how to keep your documents safe. After that, on May 25th, we'll be taking a look at how Office 365 can help solve common contract management issues. On June 1st, we'll be taking a look at different Office 365 adoption challenges and how to overcome them. And on June 8th, we'll be taking a look at what to look for in a contract management system. If there are no questions, I think we're all good. So if you think of any questions after the fact, after we send the recording, feel free to reach out to us at 904-309-9970 or at info@mydoc365.com or qrussell@mydoc365.com. If you're interested in any of our different products or our services, what we have to offer, feel free to sign up for a free demo on our website. Just head over one of our product pages, click the free demo, select the product you want to demo, and we'll go from there to a 30 to 45-minute demo. If you liked what you saw or have any interest in Doc365 in general, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at Doc365. So if there are no other questions, this has been Quentin Russell with My Doc365. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much, and goodbye.